It's October 24th, 6:43 p.m. This is interesting. I just came across. This is John Lennon, the early Beatles, the Fab Four, speaking in tongues. If anybody's heard tongue speaking, this is what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. That goes along with everything I've been researching and seeing about Aleister Crowley and Yogananda and Eastern mysticism and the conjunction of all those forces that culminate in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, with the cover depicting a vast array of it's not the Beatles, it's the Rolling Stones, it's Bob Dylan, Oscar Wilde, Edgar Allan Poe, Yogananda, uh, Mae West, Tom Mix, Aleister Crowley, and Karl Marx. I mean, these are the main characters. There's Aubrey Beardsley. There's any number of Freemasons who are in Hollywood, but there's nobody on that cover that isn't. Marlon Brando is another one. They keep popping in my head as I can kind of picture the album cover itself. But there's nothing unintentional or arbitrary about the people who were selected by mostly by Lennon, but also by McCartney. Lennon wanted Hitler on the cover as well, but they thought no, he was dissuaded because it's too obvious. This is all a cult religion, and it's all part of this tongue speaking or divination or geomancy or Rosicrucianism or any number of different branches, theosophy, all coming off the same ancient Egyptian religion forward. Arthur Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Edgar Allan Poe's on the cover. There's no getting around the reality of the fact of the counterculture being a product of a cult and Jimmy Page being a disciple of Aleister Crowley as he's called. I'm so used to calling him Crowley. Anyway, I just wanted to I point out things that I come across that are flags. So that's one of them. Okay, this is the statistics of death in 1 month, the increase in death in all these countries in Europe in just a 1 month period in July. And you have to ask yourself what could have possibly caused this, and how dramatic it is to see a 55% increase in death in Iceland in just 1 month, or 37% in Spain, Liechtenstein. These are high numbers for 1 month. They get lower, but the person who compiled these is living out in, he's off the grid camping in Norway. He's a bushman, more or less, whatever you want to call somebody living out in the woods. It goes on down the list, but it's all the countries that in Europe that have had these, and this is just like I say for 1 month. And I don't have time at the moment, but I have to look at what they are in the U.S. if we compile them, because the U.S. is really good at burying statistics or at changing them or calling them something that they aren't. Yeah, his name's Bjorn Andreas Bull Hansen, and he's from Norway. And here he is speculating about the same things that I've been uh, validating myself, and he's speculating about them.
And we know that we're not supposed to talk about this. Sometimes I wonder if humanity itself is losing its mind, that the populations collectively are getting dumber and less tolerant and less open to thinking, if you know what I mean. I see that people they don't have much of an attention span at all. And a lot of people will say, well, or think, and write in the comments that, oh, you talk too slow, get to the point, and all that.
Now, I don't know how it is in Europe or in Norway where he is, but I know here that there's no way you're going to have a conversation with anybody about reality in Europe. You can't even have a conversation about reality in the United States of America. There's a collective psychosis, is what I call it. It's partially the addiction to consumer goods and consumer lifestyle and the media, constant media watching, and constantly building a fantasy world out of what is presented in the Western media and blocking out. It's a psychological condition called confirmation bias, where any information that doesn't fit into one's predetermined cognitive grid, what's reality and what isn't reality, is simply dispensed with. It's not even heard. I've had I can't numberless conversations with people where they don't hear a word I say. It doesn't compute because it has never entered into their uh, world in any way or another. Always younger people, but it's the same thing with older people. I mean, that's how the collective unconscious or the collective amnesia that Orwell talked about, the memory hole, and people are unwilling to use their own imaginations because their imaginations have largely been colonized by whatever they watch continually. They'll go home. I remember when I was living in a suburb in Denver, you'd walk down the street at night and there wasn't a house that didn't have a big TV screen with the TV on, sitting. Everybody's living in their own personal narcissistic fantasy world, and the narcissism is the central feature of people's rage and anger if anything is interpreted as being critical of their lifestyle choices or political beliefs or what they're following as a religious, devout religion of following whatever comes out of science, for example, which is considered to be infallible, like the Pope, or the Pope, who's considered to be infallible by the Catholic community, even though the Pope's doctrine is completely heretical, and the followers of the Pope are complete heretics if they're following what he's doing, but they're not following what he's doing. Everything has become this kind of ritual, or in so many cases, I use the word everything when I mean by and large, or in the vast majority of cases, people are going through ritualistic motions day after day, and they have barely noticed that anything's changed in the last 2 years or the last 3 years or the last 4 years, when there's no resemblance between the world of today and the world when President Joe Amnesiac and Biden, everybody's laughing at Biden. I don't see that there's any difference between Biden and Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. They're on autopilot. They don't see any consequences to their action. We go racing off into World War III without batting an eyelash, and then we don't follow it on the news. We don't follow the Nord Stream pipeline being destroyed. We don't follow what's going on with the riots that are going on in Europe. We don't follow the people starving in the third world or the AIDS deaths, pandemics going. We don't follow what's happening at our borders. 2.3 million people have come across the border. Where are they showing up? I've seen film footage of a guy mile after mile of people in Los Angeles living alongside the highways. That didn't exist a couple of years ago. It existed in some form, but it's when you bring 2.3 million people in, and you bust some up to Martha's Vineyard, and they become hysterical. They're going to have lawsuits, have immigrants filing lawsuits for being delivered to Martha's Vineyard. Boy, must be a hardship. Or being delivered to Washington D.C. to Kamala Harris, or being let off buses. So it's we're going to have an open borders policy by the liberals in the Democratic Party, except they can't come to liberal states. Yeah, come in as many as you want to, but go to where who knows? This is not a rational policy. It's not a policy at all. I keep hearing these financial analysts. There's a couple good ones, Greg Manarino, for example. But I hear the same. They're using statistics that are absolutely fabricated. So they're running economic models off of, oh, unemployment's only at this. Well, do you know how they calculate unemployment? Inflation's only this. Well, do you have any idea how they calculate inflation? I mean, it's not a recession. Well, oh yeah, because stagnant growth, and that no longer matters. Oh, as Dick Cheney cavalierly said with voodoo economics, which is what George Bush called it, deficits don't matter. Why do we have inflation? Because we just keep spending money on military weapons or depleting our strategic oil reserve and canceling our oil industry because we're going to drive our recreational vehicles without any power, I guess, or you can't manufacture things without oil. And where's the electrical grid? Where solar power? How much energy does that generate? Have people taking solar panels off their roofs because the roofs are caving in, and it just becomes metal junk, and it's not cutting enough of their electricity bill to even be practical. They're being installed out here in the on the East Coast, and it's I won't keep going on and on and on, but it's simply to say that there is a war coming to America. It's already in Europe. It's the one we started and the one we're exacerbating and we're prosecuting. And there's now a dirty bomb being developed, which is going to, if all reports, and these are reports coming out of Russia, for example, but we don't believe anything coming out of anywhere else except the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, MSNBC, CBS, Fox, Wall Street Journal, and they come from a central source. It's called the Illuminati. I'll just use the word Illuminati. I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist. That the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Doors and Frank Zappa and all the people out in Laurel Canyon, the Warren Zevons, others like Joni Mitchell and Graham Parsons and Lowell George, all the people dying at 27 are part of this same divination, occult, paganism. You can call it by any name you want to, but there's tremendous amount of worldly power by giving in to temptations. And in the old days, they called it selling your soul to the devil. The Marquis de Sade, the Marx and Lenin, Stalin and Zinoviev and Kamenev and Bukharin. If you know any of these names, study the Russian Revolution. How about John Reed, the American, or Henry Miller and the Rosy Cross? That's the Rosicrucians. And Marcel Duchamp was a Rosicrucian, and Man Ray, these Dadaists. Modern art is based in the occult. It comes out of all the sexual and practices and heavy drug use, which is what Aleister Crowley was, but you can extend it all the way across to the anarchists and the socialists and the various splinter groups and irrationalists and derangement of the senses. How do you derange your senses? Well, you take absinthe will do it, or opium will do it, or anything like hashish, which is what the old man of the mountain, Hassan el Sabah, used to send his assassins out, because Hashishin translated to the barbarians to the west as assassins. And these are the terrorists. They're fundamentalists. The notion that there's only white supremacist fundamentalists and there's not Islamic fundamentalists, or there aren't Hashishin, or there aren't the Jesuits, which is a military order, who are Knights of Malta, the Templars, or any of these groups. And where it's all culminating is in a global war of all against all, and the division of one person against another person, and all kinds of anger and rage that's coming from, well, it's coming from all kinds of things. It's coming from the nonstop paranoia and rage that are being pushed by the mainstream news media. We're going to bring about war by bombing police stations, and we're going to defund the police by, how are the police being defunded? I don't know what city you live in, but I'm close enough to Washington, D.C., and it's a police, just Frederick, Maryland, suburbs that are hours outside of D.C. are filled with not just the police themselves and the sirens going and emergency vehicles and car crashes, but surveillance cameras on every block. You go 5 miles per hour over the speed limit on a downhill. It's all a control. Everybody's in a controlled society, but your mind is what doesn't have to be controlled. People are submitting their minds to this media bath and saying, "Oh, I'm discriminating about what I'm watching." No, that there's no discrimination involved when you have subliminal messages. You don't even see what you're looking at. Just like in advertising, where they embed a naked woman, so your lust, sexual desire is being stimulated while you're imagining. That's how they sell cars. It's how they sell cigarettes. It's how they sell everything. Cigarettes are a disgusting thing. I don't know. When I tried to smoke cigarettes, I couldn't stand it. Plus, I have a poor respiratory system, or did back then. I had seasonal allergies. So I could never stand cigarettes, and I could never understand. But see, you override your natural poisoning yourself with alcohol or anything else. I never liked the taste of alcohol. I could never drink beer. No doubt it was from traumatic childhood experiences with alcoholics. That was my environment. But like I say, once those addictions take hold, they're stimulated by sexual imagery, where you're being imagining this erotic experience because you're seeing Cardi B now. It's completely explicit. You can sell anything with this hypnotic music, but what you're selling is your soul. Your soul is what the exchange is. that's the end of the little sermon. This is Albert Pike. And see this 33 here on his chest? He was a Confederate general, military officer, and he was the top Freemason under which the Confederate army and military was centrally commanded by him. He was above Andrew Johnson, who was also a Freemason, and Andrew Johnson was the vice president of Abraham Lincoln. When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in a conspiracy organized by this man, Albert Pike, he was replaced by the 33-degree Freemason Johnson. Now, this is a really fascinating history, and it's really important that people understand that this is documented history. It's not conspiracy theory. But the significance of it is that there's always been a secret government. There always will be a secret government. But that secret government is just like any mafia, or just like the Roman Empire, is composed of people ceaselessly fighting for dominance, for supremacy. And Pike himself is buried in this Masonic temple in Washington, D.C. His tomb is there. The belief of Freemasons is that, just like the Egyptian pharaohs, is that they are gods. And they have tremendous powers, particularly power of supernatural power of prophecy. So here's Albert Pike's prophecy, written back in the 1860s sometime. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati. Now, the agentur would be agents or agent provocateurs, secret agents of the Illuminati, the head, the 33-degree Freemasons, who were numerous, because each temple has its own leader, just like churches. It is a church, and they are temples to where they're buried. The Illuminati, between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. So let's look at it carefully. The Third World War, that's what we're in now. He's prophesied this exactly, that these differences would be continually exacerbated between the political Zionists, and these are the temple Jews that are currently, they've identified their Messiah in New York City. There are posters of him all over the place, the coming Messiah. I don't know if I'm not familiar enough with the organization of the Jewish temple to know how many Messiahs there are being expected. But they've already flown these red heifers from Texas out to be sacrificed in the rebuilding of the temple itself, which can be rebuilt really fast. So we're on the verge of this prophecy in Scripture being fulfilled. All the other requirements, for the most part, and they anticipate this Armageddon between all the nations of the world and Israel. All right, so that's the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world, we all know. The OPEC is now a single bloc, at which the U.S. has been excluded from. The U.S. is a waning power. whether or not we're going to cause nuclear war, it looks like something along those lines are going to happen. But we're certainly unprepared to fight a third world war against a bloc of countries, including China, all of OPEC, Turkey, India, the Soviet Union's former Soviet Union, now called Russia, but they're unifying. They're taking back their eastern territories that were taken by Ukraine with the help of the United States. So Nicaragua and Brazil and South Africa and these countries that are forming their own currency system that will be backed by gold. This is just fact. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. Well, that would be us in Europe and the other countries that are not part of this Islamic world and the Zionist world, the state of Israel. We shall unleash the nihilists. Well, they're unleashed, aren't they? And atheists. Yeah, well, they're the most popular people doing book writing. The Christopher Hitchens five or four, whoever, Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins and Sam Keen, and multiple players. And the nihilists would be all of the anarchists, the let's burn everything to the ground and then build back better. Let's have a war of all against all. That's the EU and the uh, NATO alliance coming to pieces at the seams. So this is all planned by Albert Pike. Believe it or not, this is a historical document that exists from that time. It's remarkably prescient because he predicted the first two world wars. This is just the third one. So he foresaw the entire 20th century that would follow, and he has predicted what's happening right now. Well, that's how prophets are. So did the Old Testament prophets. So did Jesus Christ. So did the revelation of Jesus Christ to John of Patmos, St. John. We shall unleash the nihilists and atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries. See, the extremists that have been pushed by the press as free speech, as healthy free speech, which has been particularly the entirety of the liberal press promoted this anarchy and bloody violent revolution as being healthy political speech, and the public, much of the public bought it, or they just tune out. They're so, as the Norwegian woodsman noted, and I myself have noted for the longest time, perhaps because of our age, perhaps because neither of us are television watchers. There is a very clear thing that people that don't have their nervous systems plugged into the cyber world notice that these forces are being uh, stimulated and enabled and being called heroes, and it's the narcissistic, what I would say, nihilist, narcissist, and atheist. That's the amendment I would make to Pike's writing here. So the world is going to defend itself against these minorities. Well, the world will be the military and citizen militias and violent anarchy all going on everywhere, just like it's beginning to in Europe. Will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, however, disillusioned with Christianity. Because isn't it the Christians that are onward Christian soldiers? Isn't that who's always at the forefront of the George Bush Christians or the Barack Obama Christians or the Joe Biden Christians, Catholics, who are the Jesuits, incidentally, which is a form of this branch of uh, warlike secret societies. And the Pope in Rome is a Jesuit. He's the first Jesuit Catholic and so called Antichrist, or an Antichrist, because just as Paul said at the time he was writing, there are antichrists. There are always antichrists. There are always false messiahs. There are always false Christs. Disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light from the angel of light, the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. That's who I've been pointing out with Aleister Crowley, among others, but he formulates it succinctly. Brought finally out in the public view. It's been waiting all of this time, and it's in the public view, and yet the public doesn't seem to be paying any attention because they're too busy following the spectacle, because they worship mammon. All they're focusing on is the money. Is their money? Is the money? What will happen with the money? Well, the spiritual issue is the issue, because it's what is going to happen if I die tomorrow. Where is my soul going? That's a critical issue. That's the critical issue. And when he says whose deistic spirits, well, the deists were the founding fathers. The Thomas Jefferson Bible and the Enlightenment thinkers cut out all of the supernatural aspects of the New Testament, and the Old Testament wasn't viewed as anything but a lot of savages and barbarians. Just like the angel of light and the true culture is Luciferian. So you see it all through Hollywood, that you see it in movies of Lucifer, you see it in Al Pacino as Lucifer, or whoever these true blood people are. And it's just series after series after series. Dexter, the psycho torturer, Jeffrey Dahmer people are really just misunderstood agents of light. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. And so here we are at the end times, and that's just spiritual reality. That's just what these demonic forces that exist in human nature, that's part of our nature from the Garden of Eden. Here's another gentleman. Let's see if I can find my little clicker. Hear that clicking? There he is. Go into view here. See the hand here? That's a Freemasonic symbol. Karl Marx was a Satanist. He was a practicing Satanist. It's in his writings. The same thing with Friedrich Engels, the same thing with Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. The same thing, Stalin, I don't know whether he practiced it in the ritual fashion of conjuring demons and satanic abuse rituals, but his Beria is one of them, his torturer. And there's just endless amounts of historical research showing who these people were, and that 100+ million died under their hands just in the Soviet Union. And you throw in Pol Pot, and you throw in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and you go throw in through the Americas now, the Cuban revolutions. So, where in the world do Americans think that the Barack Obama, Saul Alinsky, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Jeremiah Wright, the BLM, the Antifa, Marxist Leninist revolution is bringing anything except mass extermination and genocide? That's what's coming. There's no getting around the fact of the figures that I just showed you of this kind of die off coming out of the blue in Europe right now. Where and what's the history of what would be causing these kind of unnatural circumstances? On top of the fact that we're going to be eating bug food that's already Aldi superstores, the supermarkets based in the UK have made a deal for plant-based. They aren't in them now, but that's what's up and coming because the dairy and the meat industry has been decimated, not just by drought, but by planned extermination, by raising the price of feed and fertilizer for fields to the farmers. And so they've slaughtered most of their herd. They've lost their land, they've lost the property. And Bill Gates is one of the big buyers. Interestingly enough, Bruce Nauman, who is a conceptual artist, so called, a Duchampian based conceptual artist, is the biggest landowner in New Mexico. New Mexico is where the Jeffrey Epstein sex cult, satanic mystery religion, Illuminati, whatever you want to call it, that's where his temple was. And it was in an equilateral triangle in a small town in New Mexico. The other points of the triangle, equidistant drives, were Santa Fe, which is the Illuminati, Hollywood, the Ted Turners, 33 Degree Mason, his wife, Jane Fonda, though she's just the best friend of Ho Chi Minh and the North Vietnamese communist at propagandizing for the North Vietnamese communist. And they have no particular belief system except Baal worship. The other point of the triangle is Albuquerque. That's where the movie industry came in through Governor Bill Richardson, who was out at the Epstein Ranch, and Bill Clinton and Bill Richardson and Bill Gates and all the Bills spending their bills, flashing the cash, and Hollywood industry all through the drug gangs. Watch Breaking Bad. That's what comes along with the Illuminati. There's the drug cartels, and there's not why people think it's so glamorous is part of the mind control that comes with the amphetamines or the cocaine or the speedballs or all the pleasure chemicals of LSD and pot and hashish and you name it. Been there, done that. So I'm going to just give a final blessing to everybody. I give God bless all of you, and I hope you're safe, and I hope you will do some reading of Scripture, and I hope you'll take what I'm saying seriously and read the Bible on your own. It's perfectly decipherable. There's nothing very difficult in reading the New Testament, even in the King James Version. You have to be seeking and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. If somebody else is telling you, I don't want to bother you, I'll just go over to because they're having a good time over here. There's millions of people here, so it must be true. Well, it works at Disney World, right? Get people to line up. I saw them in New York City, realtors there showing that New York has fallen to pieces. There's a line around the block. Where they're going? To a new bagel place. I mean, this is how pathetic it is. This is New York City culture. There's a little cupcake factory, or they've got a place that sells just custard. Oh, and you can get a $17 or $18 chicken sandwich. The real gourmet stuff, of course. All right, I think it's madness. I think it's madness. I don't think it's madness. I know it's madness. So please give it some thought, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. God bless.